Good afternoon, YouTube. So these are the original Rancho bushing that comes with the shock absorbers that we're trying to fit into a Mazda B2600 pickup. There's two issues with these bushings I mentioned earlier. One is they're too wide. The Mazda shock mounts are only 40 millimeters wide, and these are about 46. The other problem is these have a 3/4 inch diameter hole, or 19 millimeters. The Mazda shocks have a 12 millimeter bolt, but they need a sleeve inside the bushing to limit how far it compresses, because there's tabs on each side of the shock mount and there's just a straight bolt that goes through there. The bolt is 12 millimeters, but in order to fit a sleeve you need to have a bigger hole. So what we did was reprinted these bushings with a 16 millimeter diameter hole. This one's a little bit tight, but you can see that'll go in there. So you don't want to put the sleeve in until you press the bushing in, because the bushing has to be able to collapse a little bit to shove it into the shock eye. And the problem with the Rancho shock, like I mentioned, this is 3/4 inch or 19 millimeters, and that's not a standard size metric tubing, and that's the easiest way to get these sleeves. This is metric tubing, 16 outside, 12 inside. That way you don't have to do any drilling. You just have to cut this to length and then clean up the ends and use it. 3/4 inch is a standard size tubing, but you can't get 19 to 12 millimeter tube. So that's the advantage of 3D printing these bushings, is you can make a metric size hole and you can change the width. So let me show you how I'm doing these sleeves here. So I just cut slightly longer than 40 millimeter long pieces, and I'm going to clean them up in the lathe. You could also do this on a grinder. Put a little chamfer on the end, easier to shove into the bushing, but I'm using the lathe here because I have a lathe. Yeah, and then I just have a countersink tool to clean up the inside of the sleeve. So that way I've got this face squared up, and I've got a slight chamfer on the outside and on the inside, just so that when you shove the bolt in, it goes in nice and clean. Okay, there we got all the sleeves. I'm doing 8 of them, so that's why I'm doing them on the lathe, because it's quick. So you can see there I've got just short of 42 millimeters. So I like to cut these a little bit long so you have room to square up the ends. Yeah. So I guess that's like the shortest one, 41.1 millimeters. So I need to take off a little over a millimeter. Since I have the lathe, I made up this little adapter here that fits inside the jaws, and that gives me a stop here so that I can shove this in, lock the chuck down, and now I've got a fixed point back here, and then I can just shave this down until I get the 40 millimeter. Yeah, so what do we got there? 40.6. So I need to go maybe one more. Yeah, that's pretty close. We're 40.1. So I think that looks pretty good. I've got the carriage locked. So now what I can do is go through and I'll just run all the rest of the sleeves like that. So yeah, anyway, that's the do-it-yourself TPU shock bushings, and this is how you can make sleeves if you need sleeves. So that's the stock bushing that comes in here, and you can see two things. One is this red bushing that used to be in here is too wide, and that's the other difference. This has a 3/4 inch or 19 millimeter ID, and this shock mount is a 20 millimeter. So we printed the narrow with the bigger hole bushing. We made the bushing a little bit on the loose side. That's how I did it on my truck, because I needed the bushings to be fairly easy to get into place. On my truck it's better if they can move around a little bit, because that helps with taking up misalignment, things like that. But in this application, because the shock mounts are so narrow, you can't have this bushing move around at all, because then otherwise the steel of the shock eye will twist and then hit the edge of the shock mount. The end user of this wanted a tighter bushing, so I've modified my 3D part file. I'll post a link to it in the video description, and I now have the ability to specify the width of the bushing. You can specify the inside diameter. The file has the geometry of this center part, and then what I have is two separate parameters. One is on the inside diameter, I have a clearance parameter. So on my printer with the TPU filament I'm using, I do about a 0.5 millimeter clearance in here. But then on the outside diameter, I have the dimensions of this, and what you do is you print the bushing out on your printer and then measure this outer diameter compared to this outer diameter. If everything's perfect, they should be the same. But I found on my printer it was printing about 0.7 of a millimeter smaller. I think this is 36.5 outside, and this was printing about 35.8 or something like that. So what I did was I added 0.7 extra on the OD. So I have those as two separate parameters, so you can put in your exact inside diameter and the exact outside diameter, but you can also specify, okay, my printer prints a little undersize or a little oversize, and that's two independent settings I have in there. So that should work for most people. What I need to do is swap these bushings out, and the easy way to do that is I have a socket here that fits over the bushing, and I put the shock eye with the old bushing in there, and then I just put the new bushing on top, and I basically use the new bushing to press the old bushing out, get everything lined up. See, the new bushing is going in. There, I think it's bottomed out. There's the old bushing. I take that out, and then I flip this back in there. Usually I just pop that over, get it centered. That way this piece of the bushing is centered, but then there's an extra 4 millimeter wide ring that slides over the shock mount first. That bushing does not move in there, it is just tight. And then we did the same thing on this end. So this bushing here needs a sleeve. So the sleeve is 16 outside, 12 inside. So it's just a piece of metric steel tubing, 16 millimeter with 2 millimeter wall thickness. And I'll put links in the video description where you can pick that up. And then, as mentioned, this used to be that size bushing. So this bushing is narrower. I believe it's 40 millimeter wide, but then that's 3/4 inch. This is 16 millimeter. And the problem is you can't find any tubing that's 3/4 outside and 12 inside. So what you do is print the bushing with a 16 millimeter hole, and then you press a 16 millimeter tubing in with the right size hole. And that way all you have to do is cut the tubing to length and shove it in there. You don't have to do any drilling, so it's fairly easy to do. That's a nice thing with these 3D printed bushings. You know, if you want them tight, if you want them loose, if you want odd size holes in the middle, you can do that. You know, metric size, imperial size, whatever you want. Just thought I'd show you that bushing, and I'll cut in a little clip of the 3D printer printing one of these if you want to take a look at that. So as always, thanks for watching.